Welcome to the Play Their Way podcast, where we talk about all things in Child First coaching. I'm your host, Laura Jane Jones, and today I'm delighted to welcome our special guest, Percy Tussamba. Welcome, Percy. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm great, and thanks so much for this opportunity of joining the podcast.
We're incredibly excited to welcome Percy to the podcast today to talk about his incredible journey. Percy came to the UK as a refugee and is now a beacon of hope for many through the boxing gym he started and the work he does with young people. Percy, you described yourself and your work previously as turning problems into progress. How big a place has sport had in your journey?
So initially, overall, I never really was a person that would be in sport at all. So growing up, I was really bad at many sports, from football, basketball. I tried many of them, but I just couldn't really stick with it because I just felt like maybe I don't belong, or maybe it just didn't feel like right. But then down the line when I arrived in the UK, it was a point where I didn't really have a structure throughout my whole day, where I might be going to school in the morning, but then during the afternoon, I didn't have anything else to do. So then a staff member invited me to a boxing club, and that's where basically everything started. Not to say that as soon as I go into it, I was like, yeah, this is the thing. It was just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but it sounds fun, because it was just a place where I didn't have to justify why I was there. Just, you look around, you see many other young people coming just for the sake of training, for the sake of learning a new skill, for the sake of punching, release something. And that's how it felt. So I guess from that experience of just being in a new space where I felt like I belong and I could learn something, and then down the line being able to actually get into actual competitions and winning bouts, it almost became a part of me, a third place, going to school in the morning. Now I have something in the evening to do, and not just feeling like I'm isolated or feeling like I don't have anything else to do. So I guess from that, it led me to create my own space also, where I could see other young people with same experience as me that can use those spaces to overcome their own troubles or things that they might be facing, or just knowing that there's a space where they can just come and have fun and learn something new. So yeah.
Boxing is a sport that's about discipline.
Yeah.
But how much is your gym about belonging more than the actual sport of boxing?
Right, so the word belonging for me lately, it kind of became a buzzword. So you hear like many places now, workplaces, belonging, we want these, charities, communities, belonging, which is fair, which I understand. But I think for me in particular, growing up or being, just when I arrived, it was the word belonging wasn't a thing. I couldn't really hear. I didn't even know what it meant specifically. But I knew that in order to belong then, it required from you to have to justify or telling your story, why you're here. And then so that way you could have connect with someone. But it doesn't have to be always like this. At least my space at PT² Fitness, the intention is to, as I said, making sure that people know the existence of it and they can come just for the sake of learning something and being able to learn how to box, take away all the competition side of it, just being able to learn something that for most people seems very hard or tough or brutal. There's many stereotypes around it, but then you can literally look at boxing as a sport and see that it can give you discipline, resilience, and through that you can pretty much overcome many other things that you otherwise wouldn't see or be able to actually do. So at least at PT² Fitness, the intention has always been to not to push and having to say, oh, now that you're here, therefore you should become a boxer, or you should win X amount of bouts and whatnot. Just knowing that there's a space where people can learn and just have fun and build a community through that. Yeah.
Through PT² Boxing, you've established a place for refugee children and young migrant children. But how important is it for them to come there and not feel like that is their entire identity when they're there?
So so once you step in that facility, or once you step in any other facility, at least for me, I never really liked the idea of having to label yourself or putting yourself in a box and thinking, I am a refugee, therefore that's all I can do. From my own lived experience, boxing allowed me to see things in many aspects, from not knowing any single word of English and now going to a boxing club and trying to learn a skill that seems very tough for an average person, and learning your second language. And imagine being in the ring and being given instructions and you'd be like, I don't understand half of the instructions that you're giving to me because I don't understand the language anyways. But then in that instant, you don't think of what happened in the past. You don't think of what other people are saying when you interacting with them in the street or at school. All of a sudden, you start building confidence. You start feel like, oh, if I go to school, I can now put my hands up because I feel like I'm capable, or no one is here to judge me. So it kind of changed that perspective. So similar to what is expected, like it's not an expectation, it's more like when you arrived or when you at the gym, there's no really that stigma thinking, oh, because a refugee, therefore you belong here. Is a space that's open for refugees and migrants, and also the whole community. Hence, we have other programs that happen throughout the whole week. But the plan is not to only focus on the aspect of because they're a refugee, therefore we need to work in such a way and so on. It is about just making sure that everyone is safe, everyone is heard, everyone is having fun, learning a skill, and feeling like they belong and not having to kind of justify why they're there because they're refugee.
Percy Tussamba is a business owner, scholar, scientist, a boxer. All of these labels. Refugee isn't one that you necessarily go through life with, but it's been so important to you to find those who have those shared lived experiences and help them. Why is that?
Oh, when you put it like that, it sounds makes me having to look back. Because we are humans at the end of the day. We are people trying new things. We go experiences. We go feelings. We're trying to learn. We're trying to grow. And all of that makes who we are. It's not a particular instance in our life that define who we are now and who we're going to be in the future. So it's all about changing. It's all about growing. It's about overcoming and being able to be vulnerable at moments where you feel like I'm safe to be vulnerable. If that's our spaces that actually allow you to be vulnerable. So, as you said, like despite of all those labels that might seem like. At the end of the day, we're just humans, we're just here trying to learn from one another, from each other's experiences, and through that you become you. The little bit that I'm doing in the community is impacting one person. I'm sure that person will be able to impact other person and so on. So I think it just transfers, and at the end of the day, it won't be me saying, oh, because I'm a refugee, therefore you should listen to me. It's nothing to do with that. It's like, it's my lived experience, fair enough. I have something to tell you as a human, and you as a human, if you're willing to listen, you could listen to me, and through that we can make something out of it. It's not like, because there's an issue, we should only hear from a person that had experience, but it's just trying to hear those stories from a point of like, there's another human being there that went through something and is willing to help me in some way I could help them and so on. So at the end of the day, we're just humans.
That lived experience is so important. Those children and young people who come to PT² Fitness, what are the unique barriers and challenges that they face when it comes to sport participation that perhaps other children in the UK wouldn't?
I think trying my best not to look at the current political view, I think it start with the judgment, the stigma, being able to just being free and walking around, and you can tell when someone is new. You can tell if someone doesn't belong. You can tell, but just by looking sometimes. But then it's what you do in order to make them feel safe. Is what you do in order to make them that they okay to be there and there's someone there to support them. So the struggle that many young people, or even me back then, I would face, it was, for instance, not having enough to pay for a session, or enough money itself to pay for a session. Being able to travel, because there's people that have the eager of learning something, but then is the public transport that they can actually take them there. Is how far they live, and they're not able to travel to those places. Is not having a PT² Fitness down the road, for instance. It could be any other gym. It's absolutely fine. But then is those gyms trying to open those doors for people that are willing to grow, are willing to be part of a community. So the barriers are just not social, but obviously, in the personal level, some people feel isolated because they feel like they don't belong. But also they might not actually have the money or the support that would help them to get to those doors in the first place. So that's the reason my session, or the session that we run at PT² Fitness, are completely free for young refugees and migrants. And we help young people that if they travel from far away, if requires any extra support with their travels, we do that whenever we can, as well as just making sure that they're safe. For instance, like you might have a young person say, "Oh, sorry, coach, I won't be able to make today because I felt lost on the public transport and so on." You just make sure that they're safe first of all. So like trying to push them to be like, "Oh, take this bus," and so on, like their safety in the first place. So it's definitely those aspects: the social, the economical, financial side, and hopefully more and more other gyms will be able to kind of look up on those issues and open those doors for young people.
You obviously are filling a gap, a niche that's needed for these young people. But do you think if it wasn't through the guise of being a sports environment, a boxing gym, do you think they would come? Do you think there's something liberating for them about coming to a boxing gym as opposed to having to go somewhere that marks them out as different, as opposed to it being the refugee centre for kids? Is there something special about this being a boxing gym that just makes them like other kids?
For sure. As I said, like when I started, first day I stepped in the gym, I would look around and would just see young people training, and there wasn't like a need of me justifying where I was in the first place, because we just see it literally learn how to box. And many years, even now, like my coach, my first ever coach, he never knew about my lived experience as a refugee, and he only got to know like a year ago, and he was like, wow, they didn't even know like all of that. And that's absolutely fine, because when I was there, I wasn't there because I wanted to bring that side of me and justify, like, obviously you could tell, from the accent, from no understanding what the instructions that be given and so on, but it wasn't really a thing of like, oh, where you from? Why are you here? And so on. It wasn't a thing. But I think boxing specifically, as we know, despite of all the stereotype that people have about it, it just gives people a chance of learning something that seems tough, but then at the end of the day is rewarding, because you feel like you're progressing, you're learning. And takes away the label. Now you're just a boxer, you're just an athlete. You're waking up early in the morning to go for a run, you go to school, you go back to your training, you just have a normal routine that everyone else have, and I think that is a way that we could do. I'm not against the idea of having refugee communities and so on, but I think is when we amplify those activities and things that they can do, and not just being a space where they belong in a place where they're isolated. Because that's one thing I actually struggle with first, because the idea was like, oh, you're creating this place for refugees and migrants, but then if the intention is to improve integration, how do you integrate them if you call it as for refugees and migrants? Which I'm actually still, it's not for, it's with, I work with refugees and migrants, but how do you do that? So that then is by opening classes that requires other members of the community to come along and support the initiative, and not just being a thing where you feel like is only for those people and only those people should be here. Is open for the whole community. The community can help in many other ways, from coming to our running clubs or coming to our community class and so on. So I think, hopefully many other charities and communities that work with refugees can actually able to open those doors for many other activities and things where young people can feel like, I'm not just doing this because of who I am, but then, I have a range of activities that I can choose from and I should learn something from you.
That kind of brings me to a question I wanted to ask you about. We talk about the importance of inclusion all the time, but how much do we need to focus on unconscious exclusion that happens in sport?
Unconscious inclusion that happens for...
And what I mean by that is these young people feeling that they can't be involved in things. So we focus on certain communities and wanting them to be involved, but there are things that will be barriers to them that coaches don't realise exist anyway. Like you've said, language, getting there.
I think those unconscious barriers that might exist, they all can be solved by having people that have the lived experience. For instance, you might have coaches that have the lived experience, or well-known charities or communities or gyms that are trying to work with small organizations that work with refugees, and providing those supports and seeing ways of which they can help. And you can help in many ways, For instance, I'm running a boxing class, but then there might be young people still learning their English and improving their English. So that could be like a person in the community volunteering their time, if they have the time, to help those young people with their English and with their exams and so on. So you can really help in many aspects. It's not just about... is that the idea of like integration? Like we expect people to integrate, but then it's kind of like a two-way street. You know, it's not because the person comes to a country, therefore they need to learn the language, the culture and so on. But also is you being able to welcome them to feel safe and feel like they can learn those things, as well as like just be able to have a normal conversation. The same way you can ask me where I'm from, I can ask you where you're from in London or where you're from in the UK and so on. So it's just having that human contact, a connection, and trying to talk and create a connection through that. It's not just expecting so much from them and not realizing how less they have. You might actually realize that because you never had a chance of talking to them in the first place. So I think a way that people can minimize those unconscious barriers is by literally just go to your local community center and see how can you help, and go to the local community center, see how you can help, talk to people in your communities and find ways of which you can help those people that need those support, if it's for transport, language, and same way you can learn from their culture and so on.
The gym's obviously incredible, but unfortunately, at the moment, they're not up and down the country. There's still just the one. So for coaches who are working with children who might have similar lived experiences to you, how can they be more inclusive? What can they do to make sure that these children feel part of an environment and make things easier for them?
The idea of like, oh, let's, there's the elephant in the room, and therefore we must talk, which is fair. But then when you interact with those young people, you will never come from a standpoint of like, they're refugee, and that's all I should be worrying about. Fair enough. You still have to be aware of the trauma-aware training, or like being sure that, for example, boxing is a brutal sport overall. But also, I need to be aware that people might not feel safe to do this type of sport because of like lived experience and so on. It can be traumatic. But then that means, for me, for instance, is non-contact boxing from day one. There's non-contact boxing, so people can feel safe that the fact that, I don't have to punch anyone. The only thing I'm punching is the pads, the bags, and I'm learning a skill. So you take away that worry or, feeling like, I might, bringing that trauma back. So coaches can look into those things. It could be just have a normal session where, just loads of games and fun and moving around and things like that. And same way where those coaches could find ways on their own sessions where they don't feel like they pushing those young people to do things that perhaps they might not feel like they're comfortable doing in the first place. I don't know if I answer your question, but I think it's more looking into ways of which you make the session safe, and those young people don't feel like they're being asked so much of them, or they need to perform in a certain way, as well as just have in mind that yes, despite what their status might say, they're more than just that. So that means you can actually try find many other ways that you could help them through the sport that if it's football, if it's basketball or boxing, you're still providing those sessions as is, but try to change bits where you feel like is necessary just for the safety. So yeah.
You talk about labels. Is there a danger from your own lived experiences, but also looking at these young people now, that when we talk about child refugees, we just concentrate on the refugee bit and not on the child bit?
That's true. Because, is that young person that wants to play football with friends, that person that wants to be outside, making friends, or, going to the corner shop, or like just being a child and just playing and, go to school and come back home, do their homework and so on. We only concentrate on the negative aspect of it. And as well as when there's so many issues, or there's so many narratives and stories that are being told from one side, and people never hear the other side. So if it's hard to kind of like differentiate. It's hard for people if people of the average person is not willing to find out on their own the other side of the story, then it's become even harder and harder for people actually to know those stories, and again, they're a child first of all. They just like any other child, a school or kid at school is the same thing for them. They have the same ambitions, or they want to play, all of those things. Like for me, the word refugee, it wasn't something that I was proud of saying, like, because I knew whenever I said it, it would be always a question behind it, like, oh, so why are you here? Which to this day is kind of like a 50-50 type of situation. Like, at the end of the day, Percy Tussamba is my name, and do many other things, and many things happened to me in the past and still happening, but those things don't define me. Just allowing those young people to actually experience life and allow them to grow, if it's through sport, through education, so be it, but not using that one particular label as everything for them.
At the very beginning of this podcast, you said that you didn't want children to come into the gym and have to justify that label. You are incredibly successful, incredibly intelligent. You've done huge amounts academically, you do things business-wise. Do you think all of those things have been driven by the fact that you've always felt you've had to justify this label of refugee?
Have I ever had to justify? To be fair, I always try to hide. But then I think part of me still know that because I went through tribulations, and it helped me as well. That's when it allows you to grow. It allows you to, obviously you don't wish that to anyone. You don't wish that to yourself, but you still know that those tribulations and moments of uncertainty in your life, we always have something at the end of, there's a learning experience. There's something that you can take from it. And yeah, my first intuition will always be, you don't need to concentrate on that for your whole life. It's just about being open to learn from anyone, being able to go about your, like I remember for instance, university. Perhaps I had many other support I could have asked for, but I feel like, what's the point of me having to say, because I'm a refugee, English is not my first language, therefore I should have extra time for my exams and so on. I feel like, yeah, it's fair, but just never feel like I need to. Maybe it should have helped me, but I just feel like I don't have to. And I think at the end of the day, it really depends on the person. But also knowing that you can still do things and you can still overcome many other things without having to carry this label with you everywhere. And yeah, I had all the reasons to, whenever anything went wrong, and say, well, I'm a refugee, or say English is not my first language, whatever. Like I could have those excuses to give to people, but it wasn't me. It wasn't me. So and that's the reason I say, you don't have to go to a place and having to justify why you're there, because you told a very painful lived experience, and people now feeling sympathetic, or to a point might I say empathy to you. But then, can you still have those empathy if I didn't have to say that in the first place? Would you still open the door for me if it wasn't the label that people are giving me in the first place? So I believe in hard work, and that's where you can justify many other things. So by hard work and showing your skills, that's how things should go. So yeah, that's why I try not to bring those labels in the class.
Percy, you've been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for joining us on the Play Their Way podcast today.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for listening wherever you are. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, be sure to leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might like it too. And follow Play Their Way on social media, at Play Their Way on TikTok and LinkedIn, and at Play Their Way UK on Facebook and Instagram.